Welcome to Karibu Anawim's 15 Minutes at Dr. Zali's Desk special. Join us as we dive into the topics related to living with a facial disfigurement. Whether you're here for yourself, your loved ones, or for educational and professional insights, this is for you. We start our conversation with clear, understandable terminology. While we use disfigurement, it's for medical and legal clarity. We acknowledge you may relate to terms like visible difference or your own diagnoses. All our presenters have lived experience or work with people living with facial disfigurement. Curious to know more? So are we. Pull up a seat, grab a cuppa, and let's chat around the table with Karibu Anawim's 15 Minutes at Dr. Zali's Desk special.
Hi guys, and welcome back. This is part 2 of a chat with Professor Kathleen Bogart from the Oregon State University. Just a recap, she's just won recently the APA Distinguished Contributions and Advancements of Disability Award. She's an associate editor for a few journals, and she's a co-founder of DAN, which means the Disability Advocacy Research Network. So please welcome her back to the stage. Welcome, Kathleen. Welcome back.
Hi again.
Hi. Last time we chatted very briefly about our experiences as young adults, either on, as going out into the workforce and getting slapped in the face with discrimination and stigma in a big way of, oh my gosh, I don't know how to handle this. We talked about self-disclosure and non-self-disclosure a little bit. We touched on that, and we shared on just education in general. But in this session, I'm not quite sure where it's going to go, but I'm just thinking perhaps we could go down the long lines of some research and why is research important. And may I ask you a question straight off? Do you actually self-disclose in your academic writings, and why do you do that?
Yes, I do. And, I have more consistently been doing so recently. And actually, we were talking about a paper that I recently published. It was invited by Nature. Holding it up. Thank you.
All right. And highlighted.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Short, too, which is always fun, quick read. Yeah, and so I was on a panel at a social psychology conference, and the editor for that journal was there and invited me to do this piece. The panel was on kind of the experiences of a variety of researchers who had different types of minoritized identities, and we were all talking about the challenges and the stigma around doing research that connects with your own identity or experience. And by challenge, I mean the challenge that other people's perspectives present, right? So there is this historical stigma linking, the idea that people who study people like them might be biased or might have an agenda, right? And this,
we do, and it's to get our voices heard. That's our agenda.
Exactly.
Quite simple.
Exactly. We do, and it benefits our community.
Yeah.
And this bias is especially strong in quantitative research. And I do both types. I do quality and I do quant.
And can you distinguish the difference between quality and quant for our viewers, please?
Yeah.
Because I know what that is. People don't necessarily. I didn't know. There was a point in my life where I was like, what?
Very good point. Yes. So qualitative research is really where you are amplifying the messages of the people you're studying. Often I like to say their words and their quotes are your data that you analyze, whereas quantitative analysis involves putting actual numbers to people's responses. So everyone's maybe been forced to do some sort of survey where they ask you to indicate, how strongly you agree to or disagree on, liking the customer service that you just experienced. So to analyze data like that, you would put a value of 1 on, one of those things, say strongly agree, and then a value of each number subsequently to strongly disagree. And then we conduct fancy statistics to look to see whether there are probabilistic differences between people's responses. So both types of research are important, but I don't think that we can get a full understanding of an experience without first talking to people with lived experience. And that is often best done by people who share that experience, people like you and me.
Yes, I've only done qualitative. I haven't done quant because by people that I've researched about, I haven't been attached to a hospital. That's what stands my research out as a point of difference. Mine was done by word of mouth and snowballing effect, asking for people online, etc., all ethically done and ethically approved of, and having to go through that ethical issue, the ethical hump kind of thing. But it wasn't attached to a hospital, so I didn't actually have the ability to go and trawl through their things and say and target different people. I just didn't have that, so I just used word of mouth and snowball effect. And once the snowball effect happened, it was like and my advisor then, I loved it. I was loving data, gaining the data, and people actually open up a lot more to you because you actually know what questions to ask, or maybe to answer some questions. You're in psych. My background's in education and counselling, and so I was able to share stories like we have done in the past, in our past session, about our experiences, and that has elicited other stories from my participants that haven't actually been told by anyone. They haven't told anyone about it. So it was actually a really cathartic or healing process for predominantly all of my my participants.
I relate to that as well, and I think that our lived experience and our now expertise in these areas helps us develop trust and connection with our participants much more quickly than someone who does not share those experiences. So they will be more open and feel safer with us.
And then also in turn with that gives us a greater ownership or greater what's the word that I'm wanting? It's not respect, but a greater something to actually put forward there, like integrity. We have to be integrous with our research and not want to write what they say in a twisted way. We just got to represent them and their voice in as much authenticity as we are allowed and we are abled in the academic genre that we are writing in.
Yeah. And I think another point that I highlight in that paper, and I think it's really important to talk about, is that the only people who are called out for doing quote unquote research or self-relevant research are minorities. right?
So yeah, you're
Most,
right.
thinking about my field, most psychologists are walking around, our kind of historical prototype of a psychologist is an older white man, right? Fortunately, our field is slowly becoming more diverse, but, we have a bunch of, at least historically, white old men studying other white men. And occasionally women got thrown in around the 1970s or so, maybe later. So they are conducting self-relevant research, but they don't see it that way because they see their identities as the default, as the neutral, right? And it takes people like us who have been minoritized to know that it's important to study these underrepresented groups, right? They haven't, facial disfigurement, as you and I both know, has rarely been studied until people like you and I come along and do it, because we have the motivation and we have the, insights from the communities that we've been a part of to know that this is important.
Yeah. And the fact that it's not just us that is affected, it is our families, our schools, we wherever we go. Sometimes I say I part the Red Sea. Whoop, people just go whoop kind of thing, and I go, oh, thank you very much, I can walk straight through now. Regardless of whether or not I would like to speak to you and have a chat, that's it, and that's, it's just the way it is. So yes, you're right. I like the word weird, and weird, I laughed. Because would you like to explain weird, or should I read it?
I can give it a shot.
Okay,
so we often say in psychology, what I was talking about before, the white men, it's kind of shorthand for this acronym, which we have long been criticized for studying what we call weird populations. And that's an acronym for Western, educated, rich, and democratic, as in being in a democracy. Oh, I forgot the I, that's industrialized, right? So that includes, most of these kind of very wealthy, often Western countries. And so we've long been criticized for that. I think it's very interesting that we haven't even called out the fact that most of the populations we study are non-disabled or able-bodied. So I think we should call it weirda for ableness.
That's good. I reckon. I agree. But I also, I had my thoughts, and then they just wandered away. Oh dear. They just did. Like in your thing, you just said 26% of the adult US population, disability is the largest minority group and perhaps the only minority group you can join at any time. I laughed and I chuckled and I was like, yes, at any time. You do not know whether or not you're going to wake up, people living with who have got diabetes can actually wake up looking like me one day, or having a turned eye and having things eyes, because they can have what's called a third nerve palsy episode, and that can be reoccurrent. That can happen more than once, and usually for them it's short-lived, but it's very scary because you don't know what to do, sort of thing. They come onto my Facebook support group going, oh my gosh, what's happening? And there's, as I said before, there's very, very, very little information around the lived experience of living with third nerve palsy or anything to do that was non-medicalized. So living with such. So Yeah.
Well, I would say a parallel to my own experience, as I said, I have Moebius syndrome, so a form of facial paralysis, which is congenital. But there are many ways to acquire facial paralysis. And what you said around third nerve palsy and diabetes reminds me of Bell's palsy, which is a fairly common form of facial paralysis that occurs usually in adulthood. And it's often thought to be temporary, but not always. And it tends to last at least a few weeks to a month or so. And as you say, it's very, it's a sudden change that people struggle to adapt to at first.
Or struggle to adapt.
Yeah.
Full stop. They don't, there's a lot of people that get stuck in that denial stage of going through, not going through a linear, the stages of grief and that sort of thing. You got to, to acceptance. And can I ask you a question? How did you come to accept your face as is?
Well, that's certainly a process. I couldn't tell you, oh, it happened on this date because of this moment. But it's always going to be a journey. And I do feel usually I feel a lot of pride about the way I look and about my disability. I do research on disability pride, but I also always like to highlight, we don't feel proud 100% of the time. It is definitely kind of a dynamic process. And, we all have our good days and our bad days, but I have a lot of good days nowadays, which is nice. And, I think a lot of that comes back to times in my mid-20s when I started to really want to understand more about Moebius syndrome and my connection to that community and to do research on it. And so all of those things happened. I kind of decided to jump in and do them all at once. I went to my first conference for people with Moebius syndrome 2 weeks before I started a graduate program to start doing research on the psychology of Moebius and other facial paralysis conditions. And, shortly before that time, I had really started to talk more openly about my facial paralysis, and I think as you've already discussed, when you talk about disclosure, some of us have very obvious facial differences or disfigurements, but it's still actually quite common for people with our conditions to not discuss them, perhaps due to traumatic experiences previously, or perhaps due to maybe well-meaning but misguided advice and things like that. And so I didn't feel very comfortable or very confident in talking about my experience until around that time. And jumping in and doing all of those things was really kind of a crash course in kind of reducing some of my own self-stigma, all while, trying to work towards the greater good of reducing stigma for everybody. So yeah, I do think that it's probably one of the ways you could trace back my more positive acceptance.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that it's a journey or a process. And it's not just like you're climbing Kilimanjaro and you've got to the top and that's it. That's it. And you come back down and you say, aren't I proud? It's an ongoing journey and an ongoing process. You were saying about how in your 20s and beyond, beyond that you decided to be more proactive, my word, not yours, proactive in researching, and that's the vein that you chose to take. And that you have more good days now than maybe bad or more challenging days. I'm just wondering, before we go, could you maybe talk to one of your, a challenging time or what a challenging day is or looks like just so therefore people can know that they're not alone, and that there is a journey, and that there is a light at the, well, there's ongoing light. As regardless of whether or not we want to see it or not on the day. You know, some days are harder than others, and living with a facial disfigurement on top of having to go out and go shopping and doing all that sort of stuff on your hard days, that's sometimes very hard. So if you would like to answer that question, you can, but if you don't, that's also okay. So would you like to share, you know, a day or an era where you had more challenges or didn't like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think calling back to what we talked about earlier with the blatant discrimination that I experienced when I was interviewing for, for my first jobs. And that was especially challenging because it was before that time in my mid-20s where I even had the language to talk about what I had and to understand that it was part of a larger community. So I think that can be really hard to feel like you're all alone. And as I said, Moebius syndrome is a particularly rare facial disfigurement, right? Affecting maybe 2 in a million. So I grew up thinking I would never meet anyone else like myself, and I would be so isolated and that no one would understand what I was experiencing. And so, that was an especially challenging time when I thought, there's no one I can turn to would really get this. No one who could support me and give me advice. And, cut to almost 20 years later, I've met hundreds of people with Moebius syndrome and thousands of people with, facial paralysis and other rare disorders and disabilities. And I understand now that there is, this really large community, actually, that even though we might have, different kind of medical details, there's a lot of shared commonality around the experience of discrimination that we might experience, say. And I wish I had that connection with community back then. And that is what I turn to now if I, kind of have a bad moment. Maybe I'll have some take some alone time for a minute and, maybe watch some trash TV. But, when I'm getting my energy back, I'm going to go, connect with my community and remember that I'm not alone and that other people out there understand exactly what I'm going through.
Yeah, that's good. So in your challenging times or in your down moments, you like to take some time out sometimes and watch some trashy TV or movies or flick through whatever you'd like to on social media, but then you reconnect to the people who get it, the people who know it. So what I've taken out of that is that it's very important for people to have the language to be able to know what their diagnosis is, how it operates, how it runs, and then hopefully either connect with or find connection with like-minded people who are uplifting, honest, and authentic, not necessarily saying, hey, it's all bright and shiny and roses over here, because it ain't. We are, research says that we are the least preferred candidate for a job. And so we have to work our little tushes, our backsides off in order to jump over that hurdle, over that mark. That's the reality, until we start educating, and research is a way to start the ball rolling, because policy does not necessarily policy needs the research to be backing the policy changes that we need to be seeing, to incorporate people like myself, nearly normal, I call myself. The more nearly normal we are, we have our own set of challenges, because, living monocular, me, I'm speaking on behalf, I'm just using me as an example.
Mm.
We're not disfigured enough, we are not definitely not disabled, and we are not visually impaired. So where do we go? And it was the same with getting my research out there. Like, I'm not psyche. My work is not psychological enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's not educational enough. It's not legal enough. It points out to every different facet in life. It points to, but actually getting published and our voices collectively out there is a whole different kettle of fish. So before we go, what would you like people to take away from our conversation that we've had today?
Wow, we've covered so much in a short time. This is really fun. Gosh, I enjoyed the whole thing. It's hard to pick just one. I think let's come full circle to the community bit, right? So, what we've been talking around self-disclosure and then self-relevant research, right, is, sometimes people won't know it's self-relevant unless you disclose. At this point, I have a very visible facial difference. Everyone knows when they look at me, or even when they hear me, perhaps, that I have some sort of difference. And I go to a lot of conferences. So at this point, everybody knows, if they see my name, that's that professor who has a facial difference, so there was no at this point not
the professor that loves cooking or anything like that, but just the facial difference, the facial disfigurement. That's the chick. That's the girl. Sorry.
I think some of that's in there too. But yeah, it definitely is kind of part of that, identity. But I think that when we are in positions of safety and a bit of relative power, that I certainly did not have that when I was a young grad student, but I have a little bit of it now. And I think it's important for those of us who do to really speak out about the stigma that exists around facial difference and self-relevant research. So I think it is really important that we acknowledge our positionality when it connects with our research. And then kind of going further into that community piece, I'll put in another plug for DARN, my organization for disabled psychologists and students and anyone really in the kind of social sciences field who wants to connect. We started in 2021, so we're still a pretty new organization. We have almost 500 members, and we do a variety of things. We have an active email group where people can ask questions, share resources, and we share about a lot of events that we do. We try to have a presence at most of the major National American Association of Psychology conferences, and we've had a little bit of international connection. We'd love for more of that to happen. So maybe you would like to join on. Maybe other listeners would like to join on. So yeah, at conferences, we like to have at least some sort of informal kind of meetup so people can feel like they're connected. Sometimes we have panels where we advocate for greater accessibility and to fight stigma. And we also have lots of online virtual events so that our more far-flung members or the people who are not, able to travel for whatever reason also get to connect.
That's lovely. That's great. Thank you very much for your time, and we just chat. We just love it. I love chatting with you. So thank you very much for your time, and the work that you have done and do, and the last 20 odd years of research and batting for us. So thank you very much.
Likewise, it's such a pleasure to talk with you, and I am so pleased that you are here in this space, continuing on this work and really doing great advocacy. So thank you.
Thank you.
By golly
Bye.
gosh, it's the end of Karibu Anawim's 15 Minutes at Dr. Zali's Desk special. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Please remember that all information given during this episode is for general application only. If you have any specific medical issues, as always, consult with your medical practitioner. Like, subscribe, and share on whatever platform you find us on. For more information, please connect with Karibu Anawim on our website at karibuanawim.com or email us at inquiries@karibuanawim.com.